After clicking on the Add Client button, we are presented with the General section and the Identification tab. The Identification tab contains the minimum required information to successfully save a client record. The first two fields under this tab are in the Personal Details area and include first name and last name. You will notice that these are required fields as denoted by a red asterisk. It is very important that the names entered into these data fields match the insurance card, as any deviation could result in a denial on a claim. Equally important is the accuracy of the information entered into the next three required fields: date of birth, social security number, and gender. Client code is of particular interest as this may be used as a way to identify the client other than their first and last name. For example, client codes when entered manually can be based upon a client's record number as given by an MCO or another payer. Client codes may also be system generated based on your company's settings within the Configure desktop. You will also find an inactive checkbox in this section. Once a client is marked as inactive, they are hidden from the active client search list and excluded from reports unless you choose to include your inactive clients in your reports. A client can become active again in the system simply by removing the inactive checkbox. Additionally, you have the option to browse and upload a picture of the client that will then be stored here. Now let's take a look at the next two sections: address details and contact details. The street address, city, state, and zip codes are all required fields. A handy View on Map button will show the client's address on a map after the address has been entered and saved. Although not required, it is recommended that the contact information be entered. This is helpful for reporting purposes as well as for reference purposes. The final section of the Identification tab is the Other Details. It is important to note that many of these drop-down boxes must be pre-configured under the Configure desktop in the List Configuration section. The Home Facility drop-down is typically used to link clients to their residential setting. These residential settings are usually internal to your organization. If this link is established, it allows the billing to occur under the facility billing screen in the event that notes are not implemented. The cost center assignment is a very important one. Cost centers are usually distinguished by physical locations so that information about each cost center can be reported upon separately. For example, this link would be especially useful if you wanted to run a report that would show the billing per location or to know the number of clients served from a particular location. The cost center field is found in all of our reports, allowing you to report any type of information by the cost center. Cost centers are also critical when it comes to security setup. Users are linked to cost centers, which then controls the client and employee information that they have access to. Target population is another important link that is often helpful when generating reports or when filtering your client search. Jurisdiction is the entity with authority over the client and is typically the county of service origin. Legal status is the current legal definition of the client's state of being. Some examples would be DSS, minor child, or self-guardian. Smoking status is pre-configured and usually used for meaningful use certification purposes. Moving on to the last column in this section, we see the first drop-down box for Supervisor. This link is especially important because this is typically the qualified professional assigned to the client and is responsible for managing the individual's caseload. Many reports can be run by the supervisor in order to effectively manage the caseload. This is also an important link for the notes implementation. The supervisor name will auto-populate to the note, and that person is then responsible for reviewing and approving the note for billing and payroll purposes. Ethnicity and race can be useful for reporting client demographics. The LME name field is a pre-configured field under the Configure desktop and allows you to assign the entity or MCO governing the services for the client. Again, a very valuable field for reporting purposes to understand clients linked to specific MCOs or entities. The client is an employee field is useful only in the event that the client receives a paycheck from the agency. And lastly, preferred language allows you to key in the spoken language of the client. Although all data fields are not required in this identification tab, it is recommended that all fields are completed. The more data in, the more data out. After all fields have been entered, click on the Save button at the bottom right corner. This will save the information and update the screen to include all additional tabs under the General section, as well as the remaining sections to be completed on the client record.